The failure of government and parliament to distinguish between statutory legislation and common law is incompetent. There are two categories of law at the United Kingdom, that is criminal and civil law. Now, ladies and gentlemen, statutory legislation does not apply to us members of the public. Statutory legislation does not apply to us members of the public. And what the authorities are doing is applying statutory legislation upon the public as if that is law that we, the public, must comply with. And that is incorrect. So take the Road Traffic Act, for example, where it states it is an offence for a person to drive a motor vehicle of any class otherwise in accordance with a license authorise him to drive that motor vehicle. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what category of law is this? It simply states it is an offence. Well, okay, well, what offence are you committing? Is it criminal or civil? It doesn't state, it doesn't say, it doesn't categorise the law you would be committing if you were driving otherwise in accordance with a license. Do you know why, ladies and gentlemen? Because it is not law. They're enforcing statute legislation on you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is incompetence. So, when the police stops you on the streets and demands you provide your license, and they state that it's an offence not to do so, this, ladies and gentlemen, is actually incompetence and fraud, because it doesn't categorise the law or that you are in breach of. It just simply states you're committing an offence. And the reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, is because the Road Traffic Act is a commercial instrument. It is a statutory commercial instrument. So, for a police constable to tell you if you do not provide your license, you're committing an offence without categorising the law under which that offence is being committed, this is incompetence and fraud. Simply stating that you're committing an offence if you do not comply is neither here or there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am a legitimate law student. I have over 8 years judicial knowledge, and I don't need university qualifications to know the law. Any lawyer from this criminal entity called the Law Society that tells you you are committing an offence by not providing your license to a police constable, but did not categorise the actual law under which the offence is being committed, that lawyer is incompetent of giving you legal advice. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, I am a law student. So if I know this, then surely lawyers who have qualified and have their degree, surely they ought to know better. But they do know better. And what these people are doing is racketeering. They're profiting from what is a blatant fraud to force you to comply with a statutory legislation that doesn't categorise a law that you are in breach of is a complete, utter fraud. So, just to clarify, ladies and gentlemen, the Road Traffic Act, which states you are committing an offence if you drive on a road otherwise in accordance with a licence, is not a breach of law. Stating that you're committing an offence without categorising the law you're in breach of is neither here or there. So, when the police stops a person in his ignorance, he's prepared to use extreme violence to remove you from your vehicle and take your motor vehicle under the Road Traffic Act, and yet he has not even explained to you the actual law in which you are in breach of. He's simply stating that it is an offence. Well, to simply state you're committing an offence is neither here or there. That is not a crime. That is not a breach of the law. So why are police stopping people and carrying out violence on members of the public in their ignorance of the law? So once again, ladies and gentlemen, for any avoidance of doubt, and just using as an example the Road Traffic Act, when the police stop someone and ask them for their license and simply states that you're committing an offence if you do not comply, without categorizing the law under which that offence is being committed, your government is carrying out incompetent and fraudulent action against your person. And this is not an accident. They know exactly what they're doing. These lawyers who draft these acts of parliament know exactly what they are doing, and they know it's fraud. Normally, when you question the police about the law and they can't respond, they get violent, because that's the only arsenal they have left, is to get violent, to arrest you, take your motor vehicle, and then hand you over to these dodgy lawyers who bring you into courtrooms and use all kinds of legal trickery to deceive you into believing you're in breach of the law. Now, most people do not second guess these lawyers because the public genuinely trusts their qualifications. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that these lawyers are organised criminals. This law society that they belong to is an organised criminal society. And they've been getting away with their criminal actions against members of the public for years. And this doesn't just start with the lawyers, it trickles down to the police, judges, and all of these people who are embedded in our criminal and legal services. They're all racketeering. This is the reason why the public are so frustrated, because they do not feel like justice is being done at the United Kingdom. And just for a simple example, ladies and gentlemen, the child grooming Pakistani case would not have taken so long to have a public inquiry if justice was being done properly at the United Kingdom. In fact, we wouldn't need one, because the police would have done their job, the council would have done their job, the courts would have done their job, and the lawyers would have done their job, ladies and gentlemen. But unfortunately, we've got organised crime in these public services. And that's why the public doesn't feel as if justice is being done at the United Kingdom. Now, before I continue, ladies and gentlemen, any official that comes onto this platform and hears this post, let me just say this. We don't care who you people think you are. At the end of the day, the government, its agents or otherwise, has carried out the criminal abduction and adoption fraud of 6 of my children. My motor vehicles have been stolen by the police. 3 of my motor vehicles have been stolen by the police. The court has stolen £365,000 of my daughter's estate that don't belong to them. And the police have carried out racist, violent aggression against me and my family. causing injuries to my children. And when we have brought the matters before the courts for justice and for our rights to be upheld, and despite the fact that we've proven the case against these public bodies, the court dismisses our claim as without merits. So what does that mean for the United Kingdom when our values are being removed, our rights are being removed, and the law is not being applied by the very people charged with our security and our welfare? In this context, ladies and gentlemen, the United Kingdom government is acting outside of the constitutional fold of government. And if these public agents who are acting on behalf of Parliament and government are not abiding by the law, then why should we? Why should we recognise Parliament and government? And so, ladies and gentlemen, this post is the definition of you play with the law to your own detriment. We have now informed the public that statutory legislation is being applied incompetently and fraudulently upon the public. It is a fraud and incompetence on behalf of the agents acting on behalf of Parliament and the government to apply a statute which simply states that if you do not comply, you're committing an offence, but failing to state or categorise the actual law in which you are in breach of, namely criminal or civil. Ladies and gentlemen, the Moorish Society is going to continue to set the record straight until we get justice and our rights are upheld. We are not going to tolerate at the United Kingdom that there are people who are charged with our child's welfare, who are committing child abduction, adoption fraud, and taking people's children without lawful authority or a reasonable excuse. We're not going to accept a police organisation that is charged with our security, who are coming into our homes and carrying out racist violence, thieving our motor vehicles, and taking our children out of the property without lawful authority or reasonable excuse. This is a direct message to His Majesty's government and members of Parliament. We need independent public bodies. We need an independent police. We need an independent judiciary, and not this organised cover-up when something goes wrong. We cannot have the whole legal system and the whole justice system coming together, conspiring to cover up things when they go drastically wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned, stand by for more on this subject. We are the Moorish Society at the United Kingdom.